Pay attention to this small child standing in the doorway of apartment 406 at the Azalea Trace Apartments in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Her name is Presley Vincent, and she is 4 years old. She's wearing pajamas and clutching a stuffed animal. Her face is pale, her eyes wide with shock. Behind her, lying motionless on the concrete walkway, is her father, 4-year-old Colby Ryan Vincent. He's been shot twice in the back of the head. Blood pools beneath him. Neighbors are screaming. Someone is calling 911. Presley stands frozen, unable to process what she just witnessed. Officers arriving at 9:47 p.m. on the 19th of March, 2023, will find her in this exact position, trembling and silent. When they finally get her to speak, she will repeat 2 words over and over. Mommy did it. Mommy did it. Little did Colby Vincent know, when he agreed to take his daughter for her first overnight visit in over a year, these were the final moments of his life. In less than 3 hours after picking up Presley at a Publix parking lot in Pensacola, right there on the second-floor walkway of his apartment complex, a bullet fired by his ex-girlfriend's stepfather would end his life, while his 4-year-old daughter watched from inside the apartment, witnessing her father's murder orchestrated by her own mother. At 9:43 p.m. on the 19th of March 2023, a Sunday evening, Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office dispatch received a 911 call, reporting shots fired at the Azalea Trace Apartments, 7734 Navarre Parkway, Gulf Breeze, Florida. The caller, a resident of Building 400, reported hearing 2 gunshots followed by screaming. Deputies Justin Gocher and Thomas Blackburn were dispatched immediately. They arrived at 9:47 p.m., 4 minutes after the call. What they found would become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in Santa Rosa County history, not because of the violence itself, but because of the tiny witness who had seen everything. Colby Ryan Vincent was born on the 15th of August, 1998, in Pensacola, Florida. At 24 years old, he was a man trying, imperfectly, to rebuild his life. He worked as a construction laborer for a local contracting company, earning approximately $32,000 annually. He lived alone in a modest 1-bedroom apartment at Azalea Trace, paying $850 per month in rent. He drove a used pickup truck. He had no savings and carried approximately $2,400 in credit card debt. By most measures, Colby was working class and struggling. Friends and coworkers described Colby as friendly but troubled. He had dropped out of high school at 16 and earned his GED at 18. He had worked various manual labor jobs throughout his early 20s, landscaping, roofing, general construction. He was reliable when he showed up, but occasionally missed shifts without explanation. According to employment records, he'd been fired from 2 jobs between 2019 and 2021 for attendance issues. Colby's most significant relationship had been with Rachel Alyssa Moore, whom he met in 2017 when both were teenagers. They dated on and off for nearly 5 years. In May 2019, Rachel gave birth to their daughter, Presley Jade Vincent. The relationship was volatile. According to police reports and court documents filed during their subsequent custody battle, both Rachel and Colby accused each other of instability, poor parenting, and drug use. However, beneath Colby's working-class struggles was a documented pattern of substance abuse that Rachel would later use to deny him access to his daughter. According to family court records filed in Escambia County, Florida, Colby had admitted to using marijuana regularly and had been arrested twice for possession of controlled substances, once in 2020 and again in 2021. Neither arrest resulted in jail time, but both created a paper trail that would devastate his custody case. Text messages between Colby and Rachel, later recovered by investigators, showed Colby begging for more time with Presley. He acknowledged his past mistakes and promised he was clean. He sent photos of his apartment to prove it was safe for a child. He offered to submit to drug testing. According to these messages, Colby hadn't seen Presley for an overnight visit since February 2022, over 13 months. Rachel had allowed only brief, supervised visits at public locations like parks or restaurants, always with her mother present. In early March 2023, Colby filed a motion in Escambia County Family Court requesting a formal custody arrangement. He asked for alternating weekends and shared holidays. His filing included character references from his employer and his landlord, both attesting to his stability. He also included clean drug test results from February 2023. The hearing was scheduled for the 15th of March 2023. What happened at that hearing would seal Colby's fate. Rachel Alyssa Moore was born on the 3rd of June 1999 in Pensacola, Florida. At 23 years old, she was a waitress at a local chain restaurant, earning approximately $26,000 annually, including tips. She lived with her mother, Christy Ann Moore, and her mother's longtime boyfriend, Christopher Allen Driggers, in a 3-bedroom home in Pensacola. She had never lived independently. She had no savings and no assets. According to friends and family members interviewed by police, Rachel was fiercely protective of Presley, to the point of paranoia. She monitored every interaction Colby had with their daughter. She documented everything: texts, calls, visit durations. She kept a notebook where she recorded Presley's statements after seeing Colby, looking for signs of neglect or abuse. According to her own testimony, Rachel believed Colby was dangerous and that the court system was failing to protect Presley. Rachel's relationship with her mother, Christy, was intensely close. Christy had raised Rachel as a single mother after divorcing Rachel's father when Rachel was 2 years old. Christy worked as a home health aide, earning approximately $28,000 annually. She had never remarried, but had been in a relationship with Christopher Driggers for approximately 5 years. Driggers, a 52-year-old unemployed handyman, lived in Christy's home rent-free. The Moore household, Rachel, Christy, Presley, and Driggers, operated as a tight-knit unit. According to neighbors and acquaintances, they rarely socialized outside the family. They were known in the neighborhood as quiet and kept to themselves. No one suspected the darkness brewing inside that home. But there was one more member of this family constellation who would prove critical to what came next: Jason Edward Curtis, Rachel's former stepfather, whom she called Booger. Jason Edward Curtis was born on the 12th of November, 1970, in Alabama. At 52 years old, he was a drifter with a long criminal history. Court records show arrests dating back to 1989 for offenses including theft, drug possession, assault, and trespassing. He had served time in county jails in Alabama and Florida, but had never been convicted of a felony. He had no permanent address, no steady employment, and no family ties aside from Rachel. Curtis had been married to Rachel's mother, Christy, from 2007 to 2010 during Rachel's childhood. According to family members, the marriage ended badly, with allegations of domestic violence and substance abuse. After the divorce, Curtis disappeared from Rachel's life for years. But in 2018, when Rachel was 19 and pregnant with Presley, she reconnected with Curtis through Facebook. Despite the troubled history, Rachel viewed Curtis as a father figure, the only one she'd ever had. She called him Booger, a childhood nickname. By 2023, Curtis was living in a trailer in rural Alabama, approximately 120 miles from Pensacola. He survived on disability payments and occasional under-the-table handyman work. He owned a 2004 Chevrolet pickup truck that barely ran. He had no close friends and spent most of his time alone. According to his own later statements, he was bitter, isolated, and desperate for connection. Rachel's occasional calls and messages were the only meaningful human contact in his life. That desperation would make him the perfect instrument for murder. On the 15th of March 2023, at 10 a.m., Escambia County Family Court Judge Patricia Williams convened a hearing in the matter of Vincent v. Sis. Moore, case number 2-023-DR001847. Colby Vincent appeared with a court-appointed legal aid attorney. Rachel Moore appeared with her mother, Christy, and a private attorney she'd hired using money borrowed from family members. The hearing lasted approximately 45 minutes. According to court transcripts, Colby's attorney presented evidence of his recent stability: clean drug tests, steady employment, and a safe living environment. Colby testified that he loved his daughter and wanted to be a consistent presence in her life. He admitted his past mistakes and stated he was committed to being a better father. Rachel's attorney presented a very different picture. She introduced photographs Rachel claimed showed burns and bruises on Presley after visits with Colby. She introduced text messages in which Colby admitted using marijuana. She argued that Colby's history of substance abuse and arrests made him an unfit parent. She requested that Colby's visitation remain supervised and limited to daytime hours only. Judge Williams reviewed the evidence carefully. She noted that the photographs Rachel presented were inconclusive. The marks could have been from normal childhood accidents. She noted that Colby's recent drug tests were clean and that his marijuana use, while illegal, did not constitute abuse or neglect. She noted that Colby had maintained steady employment and housing for over 6 months. At 10:42 a.m., Judge Williams issued her ruling. Colby would receive alternating weekend custody, beginning with an overnight visit on the 19th of March 2023. The visits would be unsupervised. Rachel was ordered to facilitate the exchange. Rachel's face went pale. Her attorney objected, requesting a stay pending appeal. Judge Williams denied the motion. The ruling was final. Colby would pick up Presley at 6:30 p.m. On March 19, at a neutral location, Rachel was ordered to comply. According to witnesses in the courtroom, Rachel began crying. Her mother put an arm around her. As they left the courthouse, Rachel was heard saying to Christy, He's going to hurt her. I know he is. I can't let this happen. 4 days later, Colby Vincent would be dead. Between March 15 and the 19th of March 2023, Rachel Moore made a series of phone calls and sent a series of messages that would later form the foundation of the prosecution's case against her. On the evening of March 15, approximately 3 hours after the custody hearing, Rachel called Jason Curtis in Alabama. The call lasted 7 minutes. According to phone records, this was the first time Rachel had called Curtis in over 2 months. On March 16, Rachel sent Curtis a series of Facebook Messenger messages. She described the custody ruling. She expressed fear that Colby would harm Presley. She wrote, "I can't let him take her. I don't know what to do." Curtis responded, "Don't worry about it, I'll handle it." On March 17, Rachel sent Curtis $150 via Cash App with the memo "gas money." Curtis acknowledged receipt and wrote, "I'll be down there Sunday." On March 18, Rachel sent Curtis additional information via Facebook Messenger. According to forensic analysis of her phone, she sent him Colby's address, 7734, Navarre Parkway, apartment 406, along with a description: white male, short brown hair, tattoos on both arms, usually wears construction clothes. She also sent a photograph of Colby, taken from Facebook. On March 19, at 11:23 a.m., Curtis messaged Rachel, "I'm on my way. Be there by 6. Rachel responded, "Thank you. I love you." At 2:34 p.m., Rachel messaged Curtis again, "We're meeting at Publix on 9 Mile Road at 6:30. He'll have her by 7. He'll probably be home by 7:30. At 4:15 p.m., Curtis responded, "Got it." Rachel had given Curtis everything he needed: the target's identity, address, physical description, and timeline. She had paid him $150 for gas. She thanked him. And she had done all of this knowing that Curtis, a violent ex-convict with nothing to lose, would interpret "I'll handle it" in only one way. But Rachel made a critical mistake. In all her planning, she never considered that Presley, her own daughter, would be present when Curtis arrived. She never considered that her daughter would witness the murder. And she never considered that a 4-year-old child could tell the police exactly what she saw. At 6:28 p.m., on the 19th of March 2023, security cameras at the Publix supermarket on 9 Mile Road in Pensacola captured Colby Vincent's pickup truck pulling into the parking lot. He parked near the entrance. At 6:31 p.m., Christy Moore's sedan pulled in and parked 3 spaces away. Christy exited the vehicle, opened the rear door, and helped Presley out. Rachel remained in the front passenger seat. Christy walked Presley to Colby's truck. According to Christy's later statement, she asked Colby if he had childcare arrangements for the week, since this was the first overnight visit and she knew he worked during the day. Colby assured her he'd taken the next day off work. The exchange was brief and cordial. Presley climbed into Colby's truck. He secured her in a booster seat he purchased specifically for this visit. At 6:35 p.m., Colby's truck exited the parking lot, heading toward Gulf Breeze. At 6:37 p.m., Rachel sent Jason Curtis a Facebook message. He just left with her. Colby and Presley arrived at his apartment at approximately 7:10 p.m. Security cameras at the Azalea Trace apartments show his truck pulling into the parking lot and Colby helping Presley out. They walked upstairs to apartment 406 on the 2nd floor. Colby unlocked the door and they went inside. According to Presley's later statements to child forensic interviewers, Colby was excited to have her there. He showed her the small bedroom he'd set up for her, complete with a twin bed, stuffed animals, and a nightlight. He made her dinner, macaroni and cheese, and apple slices. They ate together at his small kitchen table. After dinner, they watched cartoons on his television. Presley said her daddy was happy. At approximately 9:30 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Colby answered. Standing outside was a man Presley had never seen before. According to her statement, the man was older, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. He had short gray hair and a beard. Presley could hear them talking, but she couldn't understand what they were saying. Colby's voice sounded confused, then angry. The conversation lasted approximately 2 minutes. Then the man pulled something from his jacket. Presley didn't immediately understand what it was. Colby turned to run back inside the apartment. The man raised his arm. 2 gunshots. The first bullet entered the back of Colby's head, just below his skull, and exited through his right eye. The second entered the base of his neck and severed his spinal cord. Colby collapsed forward onto the concrete walkway. He was dead before he hit the ground. Jason Curtis stood over the body for several seconds. Then he turned and walked calmly down the stairs, got into his truck, and drove away. A neighbor across the courtyard who witnessed the shooting from his window later told police that the shooter moved like he'd done this before. No panic, no running, just walking away. Inside, apartment 406, 4-year-old Presley Vincent stood in the doorway, staring at her father's body. She was silent. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. At 9:43 p.m., a neighbor called 911. Deputies Gocher and Blackburn arrived at 9:47 p.m. They found Colby's body on the walkway, 2 gunshot wounds to the head and neck, massive bleeding. He had no pulse. They secured the scene and called for backup. Then, Deputy Gocher heard a sound from inside the apartment. He drew his weapon and cautiously entered. That's when he found Presley standing in the living room, holding her stuffed animal, staring at nothing. The deputy holstered his weapon and approached her slowly. "Hey honey, are you okay?" he asked. Presley didn't respond. "Where's your mommy?" he asked. Presley's eyes focused on him. She said very quietly, "Mommy did it." The deputy didn't understand. "What did Mommy do?" "Mommy did it. Mommy did it. Mommy." Deputy Gocher picked up Presley and carried her outside, away from the scene. She repeated the phrase over and over, "Mommy did it. Mommy did it." Lead detectives Sarah Milligan and Robert Hayes arrived at the scene at 10:15 p.m. They immediately recognized that this was not a random shooting. The location, a second-floor apartment walkway, suggested the shooter knew exactly where the victim lived. The timing, less than 3 hours after Colby took custody of his daughter, was suspicious, and the witness, a 4-year-old child repeating, "Mommy did it," pointed directly at Rachel Moore. Detectives obtained Colby's phone from his apartment and began reviewing his messages and call history. They immediately found the extensive text exchanges, with Rachel documenting their custody dispute. They also found messages between Colby and friends, in which he expressed fear that Rachel would do something crazy to prevent him from getting custody. At 11:30 p.m., Detective Milligan drove to Christy Moore's home to inform Rachel that Colby was dead and to question her about the incident. Rachel's reaction was telling. When told Colby had been shot, she didn't ask if Presley was okay. She didn't ask what happened. She asked, was she with him? When told Presley had witnessed the shooting, Rachel began crying, but made no move to go to her daughter. Over the next 24 hours, detectives executed search warrants on Rachel's phone, Christy's phone, and Christopher Drigger's phone. Forensic analysis revealed the Facebook Messenger exchanges between Rachel and Jason Curtis. The messages were damning. The $150 payment, the address, the description, the timeline. Rachel had provided Curtis with everything he needed to find and kill Colby. On the 21st of March 2023, at 6:15 a.m., detectives arrested Jason Curtis at his trailer in Alabama. They found a .380 caliber handgun hidden under his bed. Ballistics testing later confirmed it was the murder weapon. They also found a note in Curtis's truck with Colby's address and description written in Curtis's handwriting. Curtis was extradited to Florida and placed in an interrogation room. He initially claimed he'd gone to Pensacola to visit Rachel, but denied any involvement in the shooting. When confronted with the ballistics evidence, the messages, and the note, Curtis asked for an attorney and stopped talking. On the 22nd of March 2023, Rachel Moore was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Christy Moore was arrested as an accessory after the fact, based on evidence that she knew about the plan and facilitated the custody exchange, knowing Curtis was waiting to kill Colby. Rachel Moore's trial began on the 5th of February 2024 in Santa Rosa County Circuit Court. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney David Rimmer, presented overwhelming evidence: the Facebook messages, the Cash App payment, the phone records showing coordination between Rachel and Curtis, and witness testimony from neighbors who saw Curtis fleeing the scene. The defense, led by Public Defender Angela Starr, attempted to argue that Rachel never explicitly told Curtis to kill Colby. She had only vented about her fears, and Curtis had acted independently. The defense claimed Rachel's messages were taken out of context, and that the $150 was genuinely for gas money. The prosecution destroyed this argument by calling Presley Vincent as a witness. At age 5, Presley testified in a closed courtroom with child advocacy specialists present. She identified her mother in a photograph. She described the night her daddy died, and she repeated what she'd told the police: "Mommy did it." On the 20th of February, 2024, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of child abuse, for orchestrating a murder in her daughter's presence. Rachel Moore showed no emotion as the verdict was read. On the 15th of March, 2024, exactly 1 year after the custody hearing that triggered the murder, Judge Thomas Danheiser sentenced Rachel Moore to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Jason Curtis, tried separately, was also convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Christy Moore accepted a plea deal: 15 years in prison for accessory to murder after the fact. Presley Vincent, now 6 years old, lives with Colby's parents in Pensacola. According to family members, she is in therapy and struggles with nightmares. She rarely speaks about the night her father died. When asked about her mother, she says nothing. The case sparked significant debate in Florida about custody evaluation procedures. Critics argued that Judge Williams' ruling, giving custody to a father with a documented drug history, was reckless. Supporters argued that Colby's recent clean tests and stability should have been weighed more heavily, and that Rachel's paranoia was unjustified. In 2024, Florida passed Colby's Law, requiring family court judges to consider allegations of parental alienation and to appoint independent psychological evaluators in high-conflict custody cases. The law also mandates that parents who make unsubstantiated abuse allegations face sanctions. Rachel Moore remains incarcerated at Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida. She has filed multiple appeals, all denied. According to correctional records, she has requested no contact with Presley. Jason Curtis is incarcerated at Santa Rosa Correctional Institution. He has expressed no remorse. Colby Vincent was far from a perfect father. He had struggled with substance abuse, missed child support payments, and had been largely absent from Presley's early life. But he was trying. He had gotten clean. He had secured stable housing and employment. He had fought through the legal system to gain custody of his daughter. The court, after reviewing all evidence, determined he deserved a chance. Rachel Moore looked at that court ruling and decided the law didn't matter. She decided her judgment superseded the system. She decided that if the courts wouldn't protect her daughter from a father she deemed dangerous, she would eliminate the threat herself. But Rachel's paranoia was not rooted in reality. There was no evidence Colby had ever harmed Presley. The burns and bruises Rachel documented were typical childhood injuries. Colby's marijuana use, while illegal, did not make him violent or neglectful. Rachel's fear was born from control, not protection. She could not accept that someone else, especially Colby, would have authority over her daughter. So she orchestrated his murder. She recruited a desperate, violent man who saw the killing as a favor to the only person who still cared about him. She provided the information, the money, and the timeline. And she did it all without considering that her daughter, the child she claimed to be protecting, would be present to witness her father's execution. Presley Vincent lost her father on the 19th of March 2023. She lost her mother, grandmother, and the only stable home she'd ever known shortly after. She will carry the trauma of that night for the rest of her life, and all of it, every bit of suffering inflicted on that child, came from a mother who claimed to be protecting her. The system failed Colby Vincent in the years before his death, allowing a bitter custody battle to escalate without adequate intervention. But the system did not kill him. Rachel Moore killed him. She made that choice. And in doing so, she destroyed not only Colby's life, but her daughter's childhood. On the 19th of March, 2023, 4-year-old Presley Vincent learned that the person she trusted most in the world was capable of unimaginable evil. She learned that mommy could orchestrate murder. She learned that love and protection can be twisted into justifications for violence. Rachel Moore will spend the rest of her life in prison. Jason Curtis will die behind bars. Christy Moore will eventually be released, but she will never see her granddaughter again. And Presley will grow up knowing that her mother chose revenge over her well-being, that her mother valued control more than her daughter's mental health, and that her mother's final act of protection was to destroy the only chance Presley had at knowing her father. That is the legacy of Rachel Moore. That is the cost of a mother's obsession, and that is the price a 4-year-old child will pay for the rest of her life. If you found this video valuable, please subscribe for more in-depth case coverage. Like, share, and I'll see you in the next one.